Just an introduction, I'm Michelle Eccles. I anchor Morning Edition on NPR Illinois here in Springfield, and then I'm the Public Relations Manager for Horace Mann during the day, and I'm going to serve as your moderator today. And today's session is navigating communications and employee engagement with a remote hybrid workforce. I think we've all seen challenges with that, especially if we have a workforce that has gone either totally remote or hybrid. It's definitely a new environment, and there are some challenges. There's some great things about it, but there are some challenges as well. So we're going to explore those things today. Our presenter is Jennifer Morlan. She's the Communications Director for the Kiwanis International, a service organization with clubs and members in more than 80 countries, overseeing an in-person and remote staff. She coordinates the global messaging and branding for Kiwanis and its family of programs, including Key Club International. Many of us are familiar with both of those organizations. And she previously held a variety of editing and leadership positions at the Indy Star, including page one editor, assisting managing editor, and features editor. Her love of journalism and writing began at an early age. Her mother and father owned several small weekly newspapers in Iowa. In fact, her birth announcement ran in her father's weekly column in the Brooklyn Chronicle. Her husband, Scott, is a sports reporter at the Indy Star, and their son, Thomas, attends Purdue University. She enjoys reading, hiking, cooking, and baking, and traveling, and that all sounds like great things, especially for next week with Thanksgiving coming. So Jennifer, I will introduce you and let you get started with talking to us about how we can navigate this hybrid workforce.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here today. I was invited by Lisa Richardson, who I worked with, of course, at the Indianapolis Star, and I was very sorry to hear about her father's passing. I don't know if you all know, but that's why she's not here today. It was quite sudden. So I worked at the Indianapolis Star for 29 years, serving in a variety of roles. In 2018, I moved to Kiwanis International. I had decided that if I were to ever leave journalism, I wanted it to be for a nonprofit. I wanted to believe deeply in what I worked for after years in journalism, and Kiwanis was a good fit. Our organization was formed in 1915. We have about 500,000 adult and youth members. If you think of the big three service organizations, we're actually the smallest. It's Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, and then Optimist. Our motto is serving the children of the world. We do that both through focusing on local and global needs, as well as offering servant leadership opportunities to children beginning as early as elementary school through our K-Kids programs that moves on to Builders Club in middle school, Key Club, which is our largest program in high school, Circle K International in colleges, and we also have Action Club, which is a service club organization for adults with intellectual developmental disabilities. We focus primarily on health and nutrition, education and leadership, and youth leadership development, both through our family of youth programs, but also through clubs that do a lot of work in helping lift leaders up, offering leadership opportunities to teens, and that through organizations such as Key Leader. Globally, we've been involved in two very large fundraising efforts with UNICEF. We worked, our first global campaign was to battle what is called iodine deficiency disorders, which are the leading cause of preventable intellectual disabilities. When women who are pregnant do not have enough iodine in their diets, they are more likely to have children who are who face impairments. And for adults, it can cause all sorts of physical symptoms such as goiters and things like that. So our work in that was global in iodizing salt which is a really simple way to get 1 teaspoon of salt is really all the iodine you need. We worked with Morton Salt and UNICEF and all sorts of organizations worldwide to make sure that the countries on the ground were iodizing their salt. That's a big thing that Kiwanis believes in, is not just giving things to people, but working with UNICEF, with the organizations to be self-sufficient. And then about 14 years ago, 12 years ago, we started a global project to fight maternal and neonatal tetanus. It's kind of a given in this country. We all get our tetanus shots, but that's not the case around the world. And there are still about 20 children a day, newborns, who die of tetanus. It's a horrible way to die. The babies are very sensitive to light and touch. Mothers can't hold them. It usually happens a couple of days after they're born. They become rigid and ill. It's very devastating. And it's because a lot of the places, their birthing practices are very different than the United States. Sometimes babies are born on the ground, or cow dung is actually used to seal off the umbilical cord. And tetanus, we will never get rid of tetanus. It's in the ground. But that's how direct contact, and that's how babies die. But when in about 2000, when the World Health Organization and UNICEF really realized the scope of this issue, it was still prevalent in 57 countries. Since Kiwanis joined, we've gotten rid of, we've eliminated maternal and neonatal tetanus in 27 countries, but there are 13 countries where mothers are still at risk of their babies dying of that disease. They're in the hardest to reach countries, the poorest countries, the most war-torn countries: Afghanistan, Yemen, Central African Republic, Somalia, South Somalia. So that's really been an interesting part of my job, is not just communicating locally or nationally, but globally. We have about 100 employees in the United States, and we have employees in Ghent, Belgium. And then I also work closely with UNICEF USA in DC. And there are 16 people in our communications department. We are a hybrid. We are required to be in our office 2 days a week, Wednesday being one of those 2 days. Before that, we were in the office 5 days a week. I think we were out of the office, probably similar to most businesses. We were in, we came back. We were out, we came back, went home again, we're back, went home again. But now we seem to be settled into the 2 days a week. Is that similar to a lot of you guys? Little hands up or thumbs up on the screen. Just curious as to how most of you are working. Okay. I've given it a lot of thought about working remote, and I came up with sort of my 3 areas that I think is important to think about when you're communicating with your employees, both managing up and managing down. I don't know how many of you manage other have direct reports, but I think a lot of these tips are good for everyone. And I think managing across and managing up is just as important, and something that we often forget about. I think one of the important things is to be intentional. Everything that I have done through remote, I think, takes much more work and planning than just sitting at your desk and going to or from meetings. But I have actually liked it, because I think it has given me a little bit more ownership of my time and of my day. And it makes me, I'm more thoughtful and considerate, I think, as far as a manager, of not just dropping by someone's desk, but actually looking at calendars, knowing whether they're busy and giving it some thought like that. One of the things that we did at the very beginning, the very first meeting that we had was we set the tone that we expected cameras to be on for all of our meetings, for all of our team meetings, our daily huddles, our meetings that we have with other departments, because I do think that is really, really important. That it's not to see if people are working or anything like that, but to continue to have eye contact, to watch your facial expressions, and maintain relationships. Some of the other things that I think have been important is deciding which formats you're going to use for which communications. I don't know if all of you, but we use Teams and email. And I have found that, yep, camera ready. I find that that the move to Teams or Slack or that, I think some communication actually gets lost. It's harder to search. So I've sort of developed a standard that I tell people I work with is, hey, if this is something that you're going to want me to keep, if it's a link to an important document, if you're sharing a file, please do it as an email as opposed to Teams, because I don't know about you, but there's not really a good way to search Teams, or depending on what your organization has the timeline set, you can lose things. And it just, so I like creating the Teams is for conversations, and emails are more for sharing documents, sharing work and things like that. So those are things that I wasn't intentional about before. So it gets sort of back to the being much more intentional about everything I do in the hybrid setup. Also, one of the things that I've realized is sort of the downfall, but you need to be more intentional about is with the cameras on, is being camera ready. Sometimes if you're in a large conference room, you can get away a bit more with maybe a little eye roll or a little or things like that. And when you're in a meeting and you're on camera, there's more of an intimacy. People are looking at you more. And to me, it's been more relevant. I have a sort of a challenging relationship with a colleague in a different department who does a lot of, and just all this, really dramatic. If you disagree, you can just see her. She starts biting her nails. She starts looking away. She does this. And I'm not sure if she would A, do it if she were in the office, or B, be that obvious about it, or suddenly turning your camera off. So I try to be myself more intentional, sit up straighter, and just really think a little bit more about how I'm emoting on camera than I did in the office. And I think it's actually helped in the office too, carry over some more good habits as far as communicating with my folks. The other thing that I've tried to be is compassionate but clear. We are required to be in the office 2 days a week, but we have had an issue, to be honest, where, so I supervise, there's 16 on our team. I have 5 direct reports and then down. And even though we're required to be in the office 2 days a week, we had an instance where there was one staff member who had been in the office 5 days a week before, but was really unhappy about having to go back for 2 days a week, which is a difficult situation, right? You want to part of you just wants to say, you're lucky, you used to work 5 days a week. What's the big deal with 2? But so she started going to her direct manager and saying, hey, is it okay if I work from home today? I got to take my cat to the vet. Or then the next Wednesday, is it okay for me to work from home today? Blah, blah, blah. My car is not working. Is it good? So every week, at least one of the 2 days. And she was asking her direct manager, who was saying, okay. And, but obviously this was an issue. This was an expectation set by the company, not an unrealistic expectation. And I had to negotiate 2 levels of letting her manager know, hey, you shouldn't say, yeah, it's okay. Even though that's your instinct, right? Your instinct is like, yeah, no big deal. Go ahead, work from home. Realizing that that person may be able to get as much or more done from home than in the office, but you have to look more closely at the optics of it. So I wish early on we had been more clear to her direct manager after realizing it was going on, to say, hey, you really can't tell her that yes, it's okay. I mean, this is the expectation for all 100 employees, and she needs to come in. But at the same time, I think being compassionate that the remote does allow for some really good opportunities to allow people to maybe keep working and not have to take vacation days, or if they're a new employee, to be able to work from home. We had a coworker whose mother was very sick and was dying, and she'd only been here since January, didn't have a lot of vacation time built up. And we let her work a couple of days a week from South Carolina. Now, some people may say that that is, sending mixed messages, but I feel if the employee has been good to the standard and is there all the time and doesn't seem to be taking advantage of the work from home opportunity, that's when you let people benefit from their hard work. But I do think being clear is something that I'm learning that is really important, because I think people have the instincts, or there's always a, yeah, but her, or, oh, you let her, and oh, you let this person's coming in, which I don't think is a healthy workplace environment to have. There was also another person who had worked with her direct manager because she was a designer and did not have a laptop. Most of us work on laptops, but they worked on Big Macs. And when COVID happened, they took them home to work. And so it's not as easy going back and forth. And she had told her direct manager that it was easier for her to work just 5 or 6 hours in the office and then come in late and leave early. And that was a really bad optics. And so I hadn't been aware that agreement had been reached. So then I was the one who had to go in and say, everyone else is here the full workday. This person, we have to have that same expectation. And so that she's been doing that now for like 3 months and everything's fine. I don't think she notices that big of a deal that she's there. We have a 7.5-hour workday, which is really nice, but she's there the full 7.5. So it's kind of like, I realize it's sort of like when my son was young and you had a babysitter, that if you had to set the expectations out clearly from the get-go, if you expected them to do the dishes after they made dinner for the kid and clean up the kitchen, you needed to tell them that the first time, because if you wait till the 3rd or 4th, then you come across as, why didn't you tell me that before? So I really think being clear and adjusting as you need and explaining that is helpful. Because without guidelines, I think people default to their personal preferences. And while we try to have a very relaxed work environment, I think that's important. The other thing is to really embrace the hybrid. I feel this is strange. Some people think this is strange when I say this, but I feel actually a greater intimacy when I'm working and talking with my coworkers one-on-one online than I almost do in the office. You see a little bit of their homes. We have lots of cats that you see fluffy tails going across the screen. Kids come in, and will say hi. And I've really enjoyed that. I've really enjoyed that kind of intimate feeling with people. I think too, I'm a little bolder, and I have a little bit easier time delivering maybe what might be bad news online. There's a little bit of a shield. There's a little bit of a comfort. And I feel like I can prep myself a little bit more at home because I'm not running from one meeting. I mean, I'm going from meeting to meeting, but I'm in the security of my home, and I've kind of relied on that. Yeah, I can bolster myself maybe a little bit more. And I've really enjoyed the flexibility and allowing my colleagues or the people I supervise to have the flexibility. We do have people who like, hey, if you need to take a walk at 4 o'clock before it gets dark and then jump back on, the time that we save not driving back and forth to work is great. So, but one of the challenges I've had, and this is something that I'm hoping that maybe you guys can help me with, is how to handle the in-office day chatter, right? So I have found, because we're at home 3 days a week, on the 2 days that we're in the office, people use that. I think productivity is better on the days we're working from home than days in the office, because people spend so much time going around, chatting with their friends, finding out what's going on, taking a lunch break, and that's all good. But I think that there are really bigger swings in productivity on the hybrid schedule. And it's hard because you don't want to squelch collaboration, relationship building, and all of that. But at times it doesn't feel super productive. So I was kind of hoping to get some advice on that from any of you. Other than that, those are my 3 takeaways and tips of how I've sort of been managing and learning throughout this process. So I hope some of my thoughts are helpful.
With that, does anybody have an initial question for Jennifer? Okay, I will say, now with your workforce, do you have, when you're communicating to the folks that you communicate for Kiwanis, is it a challenge because they're all in different locations? Or are they in different locations? That's one of the things we run into, is we have employees that are throughout the nation, right? And it used to be we all were in certain offices, right? And so you at least had that interaction and all of that, and you had a really good feeling for the culture. But now that we're all at home and we've brought in a lot of new people that are remote as well, the challenging thing we find is hitting that sweet spot for communicating to people and making sure that we're reaching them in the right way. Have you had any of those challenges? Anybody on the call?
Yeah, well, we do. And we also have volunteers who are all over the world. In some ways, I think the fact that everyone now is more comfortable with things like Teams and Zoom, it's people are more comfortable with, but we're holding more meetings. So, we have people in the Philippines who, so you may have a meeting at 8 in the morning, and you have people in Western Canada who are getting up at 5 in the morning for the meeting, in order for the people who are in the Philippines to be joining the meeting late at night. So, and then we have people in Ghent. So it is difficult to get everybody on. We'll meet at noon, but it's the end of their day. And if a meeting runs long, for us, it's just a meeting running long before our next meeting. But for them, it's the end of their day and they want to go home. So it is a challenge.
What are some of the other challenges you guys are having on the call? Anybody, facing these kind of hurdles?
I agree with that. In the chat, some people are saying that, yeah, you just have to deal with the dip in productivity on those days. And I agree that when coworkers get along and are friendly, it's makes for a better workplace and more productivity in the long run. That sometimes, you know, I had a colleague stop by yesterday. I was really busy, but she sat down and started telling me about her son's college visits. And I knew that I was going to have to work 45 minutes at home that night, but it didn't matter because the upswing of her having the time to sit and have face-to-face to me was more important than whatever memo I was working on.
I know in our place, we often will we're all there in the same day. So I don't know how yours works, but we try to have our team days is when we all come into the office instead of somebody's there on Monday, somebody's there on Tuesday.
Right. Yeah. We're all pretty much there on Tuesdays and Wednesdays.
Eat for lunch and do our meetings, and we have some face-to-face, which I think helps with that whole relationship thing as well. And usually if we're doing lunch, you know, we get hopefully the socializing out for our team at that. But it is nice to have people, you know, in a room with you again. We, through the pandemic, really used Teams and Zoom. We chatted. Like a lot of people say, well, I don't know when I can say hi to my coworkers, but like you were saying, check their meeting calendar and maybe you can just ping them and talk to them like you would go to their desk if you need to. And not be scared to do that, because that I think has helped us. You know, I have a question. I'm not going to wait, you know, until I get to see them in person, or I don't want to put a meeting on their calendar. It's just a quick question. We've been able to, you know, just to hit the little video and they can decline if they're busy, but we're able to keep that conversation going.
We've developed kind of a shorthand where you'll just send someone a Teams message that says hi. And if they respond, then, you know, they're free without checking the email. I know the lights, you know, the green and red and everything, but I don't think those always are, you can count on them. So just say hi and then text back busy. I'll ping you when I have a chance. That's been helpful too.
Anyone else have some questions or some experiences they'd like to share?
What are some of the biggest challenges people are facing or continue to face?
I have a question. So I have a team they are going in person to hospitals, but they're in 4 different cities.
Oh.
So that's my team. So I try to make my rounds, right, and go visit them in person, and I get 0 things done on those days. So it's mostly, but I go there with the intent of spending time in person, not getting things done, right? So I don't hardly even open my computer when I'm there. And I do try to book other meetings and stuff like that. So I'm just curious if you have any tips on, it sounds like your people, are all 100 people in the same physical geography, or are they all over? How do you team build remotely?
For my communications team, we're all together. Kiwanis as a whole has people around the country, around the world. Like I said, in addition to Ukraine, we have some people in India. I mean, in addition to Belgium, we have someone in Ukraine and in India. Team building is really hard, especially for new employees. We onboarded 2 employees this year when we were still working from home. For a while, we had a Friday afternoon coffee time, but it was just the same couple people who were doing that. I think some of it's actually been, we've had some times where people have actually, if you can get a funny thread going on Teams. I one time misdirected a picture of a baby hippo to somebody or something, because I'm big on the Cincinnati Hippos. And it just started this big rush of everybody laughing about, I actually turned out I was making fun of myself, and that became a good starting point. So I think kind of being okay to put yourself out there as the person who starts it, or the person who having a sense of humor about yourself. Because I think people in communications usually are pretty funny people and witty people. And if you can get that, something like that started, but yeah, it is hard. I wish I had a better idea. I think it's something that we're all struggling with. Or I think if you can break it down into some smaller teams, that is less intimidating for people. People may be more likely to, if you have like affinity groups, not formal, but within your team, we have some gamers, people who like both board games and electronic games on ours, and they've kind of split and done some things together. Or we have people who talk about books, so maybe breaking out into some book groups. Or we've had new employees, and I've kind of made a point of matching them up with an existing non-manager, but another employee who's been there a while, to sort of be their point person. I think that helps. It is hard though.
Yeah, it is hard. Those are good thoughts. We do, I've noticed just lately, we're kind of, we've been making fun of other people on social media, you know, like in a semi-mean way, like our competitors kind of thing. So I don't necessarily want to encourage that, but definitely like, I like the idea of like a funny chat, because I don't think my team would do. We're all like busy parents. We're not going to do a team coffee hour. It's just not going to happen realistically.
I think that was a good effort that had been started, but I don't think it.
Yeah.
One
And
thing
it's
that
just like, we're all too busy at work. So it's just, you know, to ask them to do that.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of a funny chat. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
at Horace Mann, we started something kind of in line with our DEI initiatives, was to start a book club. And, you know, some of the books we did at the beginning were on race, and now we're doing some on mental health, but it's like, it's optional. Obviously, it's not anything people are forced to do, but it's been a good way for us to get to know people in other locations, and a good way to kind of just, you know, unveil who you are and be very sensitive in that space. And of course, you know, we have rules for how we share things, and what we share there stays there, that kind of stuff. But it's been really interesting to see how well that has worked, as far as really putting us in touch with other people in other locations and giving you some of that opportunity that you would have when you were in person at work, you know, the water cooler kind of stuff. It gives you that kind of feel. And it's been kind of, I mean, I would say it's been a success. We've gotten, I think there's been like 75 to 80 people that have taken part so far, and we just started it at the beginning of this year. So
we have a book club, but it's one of those things, they decided to keep having it on the day, Wednesday's the day that all 100 people have to be working. And one of the things that I'm struggling with that is because then everybody's trying to get their meeting on that day, and everybody's trying to do their book club or their whatever on that day. And so the entire day is just awash with meetings. And I always kind of think, well, couldn't, you know, does book club have to be in person? Could it be something that we can do remote? Because I think we have to be careful of the time that we're in the office, of still being able to get work done. Because as a manager, I feel a lot of times like it's having all those meetings on those days almost doubles my day, because I still have to get the work done that I would have gotten done if it wasn't full with team building and those experiences. There's a question in the chat about keeping people on task. I'm just curious if any of you guys use Planner. I don't know if Microsoft Task List is similar to that. I think there are so many things out there that are trying to help us keep on task, and then it almost feels like one more thing that we need to do in order to stay organized. I have found that the one-on-ones have been even more important during being hybrid, where I will ask the people that I direct supervise to go in with kind of a list of their the top things that they're working on, and then what we call stucks. You know, where are there things that are keeping them from getting their time done that I can try to take off their plate for them and take to a higher level so that they can focus on what they're doing. And I think that's been more important during this time. One-on-ones, yeah. And it's good when people come in with a list of what they want to talk about. Sometimes I can tell that a coworker or someone I manage just really needs to vent during the one-on-one. And sometimes it's helpful if they have a list of what they're working on. The thing that I try to tell people is, when you have your most energy during the day, focus on what's really important. Use that time to be to work on the tasks that are really going to make the biggest difference in whatever you're working on, and try to use the time where you maybe know you're not as alert, because I've become a much more aware of my personal alert levels and everything else at home than I was at work. But use some of the other time where you don't need your creative juices as much to maybe work on your emails or your more your rote tasks, and then know your creative hours and use those to stay really on top to do your most meaningful work.
Does anyone else on the call have any suggestions for Amanda, especially when it comes to allowing, the team to catch up, but staying on task and staying on deadline and balancing all of that?
Do other people think it's harder on hybrid? I think it kind of is. I also think for a lot of communication departments, our workloads were increased because of the hybrid. We've increased the number of webinars we're doing. We've increased the number of emails we're sending to our members, not for the good, in my opinion, where our teams are creating more. I like that. What are we celebrating today? We're, once Teams and Zoom hit, I don't know about, we're creating more things for our members to do, or more expectations for advisors of our youth programs. And so those all came with videos, right? Suddenly the video use of videos increased. How we're going to reach people on social media, everything suddenly became digital. And so it really increased the communications workload. We always ask, what are we celebrating today? And then we also, what issues do we need to address? Yeah, that's a good way to start the conversation. We need to do a better, I need to do a better job of celebrating. We have a lot of former journalists on our team, and journalists can be a little sarcastic. I don't know if we have any others out there. We're not really, we see through, I think, a lot of some of the old-fashioned team building things and like that. And we have a lot of people who just like to do their work and maybe kvetch and all that, but celebrating is something that we need to get better at.
I am going to remove you from the spotlight.
Oh, thank you.
See if that helps at all. I don't know if that will help. If anybody wants to jump in and participate, you're welcome to, as well, as far as taking off your video or asking questions. I think you've had some great suggestions, Jennifer, as far as
thank you.
things to do. I think it's just a new environment for all of us, and we're all being very much challenged in just, you know, how to make things work in all of our different working environments. And I think everybody's situation is just a little different. So it makes it tough. Anybody else have anything they want to ask? And we'll probably wrap things up here, but if you have more things you want to ask about as far as managing that hybrid work environment or how to communicate to a hybrid workforce.
I'll just share that our leadership team, so I'm on a team of 80 marketers. And so leadership team is about, I don't know, 15-ish. And we do a book club as part of our leadership team meeting. So like for the first 30 minutes, it's forced, right? Like it's not an optional thing. But I do find it interesting, and the conversation is good. You know, it gives you insights into how our teammates are working, how they think, how their brain works, that kind of stuff. And we actually did one on like Enneagram and leaders. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Enneagrams, but that one was really interesting to do. And then most recently, we didn't do a book. We just did like a very long Harvard Business Review article. So I don't know. I think that's while at first I was kind of annoyed that like, oh, this is forced fun, but I think it's been really insightful into like how the team's brain works, you know, like how your coworkers' brains work, and that helps you work better with them. So I'm kind of on board now, but just sharing another example of something that we do because the team is completely remote. And so they offer an in-person on those meetings, and there's maybe 4 or 5 people in the room, and then the rest of us are on Teams depending on where people want to work that day. But there's no requirements on who comes in on what days, but it is just kind of a, if you want to come in, if you don't kind of mindset. So, but there's no stipulations on the hybridness. So I don't know, that might help with if your people aren't loving the force to come in and they're productive, you know, I don't know.
I think we're a volunteer-led organization. So there's a board of directors. It's really quite political. I was surprised when I first got there, but people campaign to be on the board of directors, and then you campaign to be the president. And our members are typically male and typically older. I never thought I'd, to be honest, work for an organization that was so heavily male, but a lot of them just don't get the hybrid thing at all. And they'd be like, well, when I worked, we were in the office 5 days a week. You should be in the office 5 days a week. And I think that's kind of, for me, it's actually sometimes a fear that even though the executive director tries to, does run the day-to-day operation. So I kind of feel like we need to be really thankful. The other thing Kiwanis did, it's a great place to work. They're giving us a $25 a week gas stipend to help pay, as long as gas prices are over $3. They're giving us an extra $50 in our paychecks to help, because some people were saying, it's difficult working with the gas prices. Again, we used to work 5 days a week, but everything feels different now. So, I think that was above and beyond for them to supplement the gas costs for people driving to work. And they did it for the same amount, no matter where you live. And so I live 1.2 miles from my office, and there are people who drive in 40 miles. So it's been a big benefit for me.
I was going to say your older men will feel that hurt though of not changing when they start losing employees, because the world has changed and they can get everywhere.
Exactly. When it becomes harder to find people. There are people who are not, I don't know if there's anyone on this call, people who are not taking jobs where even 2 days a week. So it's, yeah, I totally agree.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you.
It was a small group today, but I think it was really good conversation.
Good.